This is what $700 worth of cables looks like. Hey guys, Zach here from Primrose Productions. Got a cool video for you today. It's going to be a little involved. We are reconfiguring my Patchbay today. I got a few new pieces of rack gear that I want to integrate into my existing rack. So we gotta make sure everything's routed properly and everything can interconnect to everything wherever we would need to make connections. So that's where this Patchbay reconfiguration is coming in. And yeah, so the first thing we're gonna do is we are going to reconfigure the rack itself and move some things around, make room for the new stuff, and yeah, let's start there. Now the Patchbays are getting moved down into this open space down here, but we're not going to bolt them in yet because we're still going to do some stuff wiring wise before we actually screw them in. That really did not want to come out of there. So the central station we're actually getting rid of entirely because the new interface kind of defeats the purpose of it. So unfortunately, these units have the power cable already attached, so that's kind of a pain in the ass, but whatever. This space is such a tight squeeze, but go behind it and try and fix it. Well, that was a little ridiculous, but whatever. That screw does not want to go in. I'm not going to force it. So that's just going to have 3 screws instead of... Oh, maybe it's the screw and not the hole. Let's try a different screw. Oh yeah, that's much better. Alright, so now the rack's rearranged. We are still going to do something with these Patchbays. We also have one more Patchbay we're going to install. So those aren't screwed in yet. We're actually about to pull those out, and I will show you why. So the biggest thing with wiring a Patchbay is planning. So I've already mapped out where everything's going to go, how everything's going to work. Pretty much everything from 17 to 24 is kind of mostly a moot point right now. That's just planning for the future because I don't have these extra 8 mic inputs yet. I also don't have those extra 8 inputs into the interface yet. So those are kind of a moot point. But for the most part, we have the mic inputs, well, outputs rather. So the mics get plugged into here and come out of here, and then they go into the preamps. Then out of the preamps into compressors, out of compressors into the interface. And there's some pieces listed on here that, again, I don't have yet. I'm just planning for the future. I don't have this preamp yet. I don't have this EQ yet. I don't have this compressor yet. So there's a couple things on here that are not going to be immediate right now. But these mic inputs, these mic inputs, these preamp inputs, then these compressor inputs are all going to be right now into the interface. We're going to have 4 headphone returns instead of 8. And we're going to have 8. We are still going to have 8 coming out of the interface into the Patchbay, so we can route that into compressors or anything, or back into the headphones or whatever. The other thing with Patchbays is you need to think about normalization. There's different ways that things can be configured. So obviously everything's going to be plugged into the back, and then you're going to make your routing connections in the front here. But you don't necessarily want to have to run cables between every single input if you don't have to. If things are going to be consistently hooked up together, like the mics going directly into the preamps or out of the compressor into the interface or whatever, then you can think about normalization. And normalization is just how the connections work. So when you're full normal, if there's nothing plugged into the front, then the back top connection is connected to the back bottom connection. But if you make a connection to the top front or to the bottom front, then it breaks that connection from the back to the bottom, and it's going to automatically connect just the front either way. With half normal, the backs are connected together, and if you make a connection to the front top, then that connection still stays together, so signal is going to come out of A and into B, but it's also going to come out of the front of A, so you can route that somewhere else. But if you plug into the bottom on the front, then that breaks the connection in the back. Okay, then the other option is through, which is just every single thing goes into the back, out the front, into the back, out the front. And for the most part, the way that this is going to be set up is going to be full normaled. So everything from 1 to 16, I'm going to have pretty much full normaled. So if there's nothing plugged into the front, it connects right to the next thing, and so on. But if there's a connection in either point in the front, then that's going to break that connection. And the reason for that is if I want to, say, connect this mic to this preamp instead of this mic to this preamp. So if I plug into the top, I can go into this preamp, and that breaks the connection into this preamp instead, so we don't overload the mics. And then these inputs are not going to be normaled. They're going to be through inputs. And the reason for that is these mics are going to come out, and we're going to want to route them into preamps or directly into the interface down here. And obviously we don't want them to come out of the mics and directly into the headphone returns. So pretty much the way I'm just going to set it up is just everything 17 to 24 is going to be through, and everything 1 through 16 is going to be full normal. So you can see with the Patchbays, first we have labeled them all according to our diagram here. All right, now we need to set up the normalization modes. We have two different kinds of Patchbays here. This one's a Nutric Patchbay, and this one is half normaled, just automatically, so I can't switch that one. But for both the Behringer Patchbays, we're going to make sure that inputs 1 through 16 are full normaled, and inputs 17 through 24 are through. So all we got to do for that is just put these switches where they need to go. All right, so that's inputs 1 through 16 on that one, all normaled. And that's inputs 1 through 16, all normaled on this one. So I've already gone through and I've labeled all of these patch cables so I know exactly where they're going to be plugged in to each of the Patchbays. So we're going to plug everything into the Patchbays and then we're going to load them into the front. The reason for this is the Patchbays are much shorter than all of the other rack gear. So once these are in place, it's going to be really difficult to get in there to make these connections on the back of these. So we're just going to make the connections here, and then we're going to move everything into the rack and just kind of slide these cables through the front of the rack, and then we can access them from the back to make all the other connections afterwards. So you guys missed me making a few of those connections, and for that I apologize, but my memory card got full on the camera. So at least you only missed a couple, and we're going to keep going. Now this is where it's going to get a little confusing, because half of these cables actually need to go to the second level. So it'll be interesting trying to move all of this over, but once the connections are made, it should be relatively simple. Tie off these couple cables we aren't using, so we don't have a huge mess to sort through with them. I'm pretty sure these are the only 4 connections that we aren't using at all out of all these cables. Actually, no, that's not true. There's one other set of 4 that will eventually be used that are labeled, so they will be going into the Patchbay side, but they won't be going into any piece of outboard gear yet. That's saved for my next little purchase. Load this into the rack and just stuff all these cables through the back of the rack and seat these in the front. Still have one more Patchbay to do, but because these are interconnected by sets of cables, we're just gonna have to do it this way. All right, we got the bottom 2 bays wired. Now we're gonna wire the last one. Alright, now this one's wired up. We're going to put this one through the rack Again, through the front of the rack, push the cables through the back, and install it in the front. All right, now we're gonna make all the back connections. So if you look here, the way I have this set up is these are the mic outputs, preamp inputs, preamp outputs, compressor inputs, compressor outputs, and interface inputs. And I also have some returns over here. Ignore this. This is just the DI guitar track that you're about to hear coming out of the interface and going into the reamp box. Yeah, so I also have it wired so that on the back of this thing, everything, if let's say I wanted to do channel 5 here, if I wanted mic input 5 to go into this preamp, to go into this compressor, to go into the interface, I don't have to plug in a single patch cable in the front. It all just wires together perfectly in the back. As you can see here, it's functioning fine. We got this preamp going to this compressor, going into the interface without issue. But let's say I wanted to go into this compressor instead. Or if I wanted to go into this preamp instead of the first one. Or let's say I wanted to go from the preamp directly into the interface without using a compressor. It's all super simple, attaches perfectly, takes 2 seconds to reroute things. So much easier. So that's it, guys. That's my Patchbay rewiring video. If you saw, it got a little funky at the end there because the last Patchbay I have, the Nutric one, is automatically half normaled, which I'm really not a fan of. So odds are I will end up swapping that one out with another Behringer one so I can have those first 16 channels full normal. But other than that, it all works great. Everything connects the way it needs to. I can route any individual piece of gear to any other individual piece of gear with no problems at all. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you found that helpful. If you have any questions about anything in the process, please leave them in the comments below. I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.